My dear friends, there is a question that quietly lives in the hearts of countless people. They wonder, must I feel something extraordinary before my desire can become reality? Must I force excitement, joy, certainty, or passion for my assumption to work? Many have struggled because they were told that unless they generated overwhelming emotion, nothing would change. They exhausted themselves trying to manufacture feelings that simply were not there. They believed they had failed because they could not maintain emotional intensity throughout the day. I invite you to consider a completely different understanding. The creative power within you has never depended upon emotional drama. It responds to what you accept as true. There is a tremendous difference between emotion and acceptance. Emotion rises and falls like waves upon the sea. Acceptance is quiet, it is stable. It is the silent agreement within your own consciousness that says, this is who I am, this is my reality. Think about the countless beliefs you hold every single day. You believe your name is your name. You believe where you live is where you live. You believe your family members are who they are. You do not wake each morning filled with intense emotion about these facts. You simply accept them. They require no excitement. They require no celebration. They exist because they are natural to you. The same principle applies to every desire. The goal is never to create emotional fireworks. The goal is to arrive at the natural feeling of already being the person who possesses the desire. And here is something many overlook. The word feeling does not always mean emotion. Feeling, in its deepest sense, is the inward knowing of reality. It is the acceptance of being. A person who owns a beautiful home does not spend every waking hour overwhelmed with happiness because they own it. It has become ordinary. A successful entrepreneur does not jump with excitement every time they remember their business exists. A happily married couple does not continually experience emotional intensity simply because they are married. These conditions have become natural. Reality becomes ordinary the moment it is accepted. When people attempt to manifest, they often chase emotional highs instead of inner conviction. They believe that if they cannot cry with joy, laugh with excitement, or vibrate with endless positivity, they are somehow failing. Yet the truth is wonderfully freeing. You may feel calm, you may feel neutral, you may even feel tired. None of these prevent your assumption from becoming fact. The only question that truly matters is this: what have you accepted about yourself? Suppose someone tells you that tomorrow morning the sun will rise. Do you become emotional? Of course not. You simply know it. There is no excitement because there is no doubt. Certainty is peaceful. Likewise, if you have truly accepted that your desire is already yours, there may be very little emotion attached to it. In fact, the absence of emotional struggle often indicates deeper acceptance than overwhelming excitement ever could. Many people unknowingly delay their own manifestations because they continue checking their emotional state. Every hour they ask themselves, am I feeling enough? Am I believing enough? Am I excited enough? Notice where their attention remains, not on fulfillment, but on lack. The very act of measuring whether you are feeling correctly implies you believe something is still missing. Instead of resting in completion, you continue searching for proof that you have done enough. There is nothing to prove. Creation is not persuaded by emotional performance. It responds to identity. The world faithfully mirrors the person you believe yourself to be. If you believe yourself to be fortunate, life reflects fortune. If you believe yourself to be loved, love appears. If you believe yourself to be prosperous, prosperity unfolds. If you believe yourself to be healthy, health finds expression. Notice that belief quietly precedes experience. Emotion may accompany belief, but belief does not depend upon emotion. Imagine an actor upon a stage. During rehearsal, they may perform with enormous passion, but eventually the role becomes familiar. The lines no longer require intense effort. They flow naturally because the actor has become identified with the character. Life works similarly. At first, assuming a new identity may feel unfamiliar. Your old habits of thinking may resist. You may not experience immediate confidence. That is perfectly acceptable. Continue returning to your chosen identity until it becomes natural. Do not fight your emotions. Do not condemn yourself because of fear visits. Do not believe temporary doubt has ruined everything. Passing emotions are visitors. Identity is the homeowner. Allow emotions to pass without granting them authority. Clouds may cover the sun, yet the sun remains unchanged. Likewise, anxiety may visit your mind while your chosen assumption remains alive beneath it. People often ask, can I manifest while feeling anxious? Certainly, the question is not whether anxiety appeared. The question is whether you continue returning to your accepted reality. A traveler walking toward a mountain may encounter rain, wind, or fog. These conditions do not change the destination. They merely accompany the journey. In the same way, temporary emotions do not determine your future unless you decide they define you. Many have mistakenly given emotions creative power they do not possess. Emotion alone creates nothing. Every day, people become angry without changing their lives. They become excited without lasting transformation. They become fearful without every fear materializing. Why? Because passing emotion is not the creative principle. The creative principle is consciousness accepting itself as reality. This is why repetition becomes so valuable. Not because you must convince some distant force. Not because the universe refuses to listen. Repetition gently familiarizes the mind with a new identity until it feels normal. You are not forcing belief. You are cultivating familiarity. Anything repeated often enough begins to lose its strangeness. Consider learning to drive a car. In the beginning, every movement requires attention. Every turn demands concentration. Yet after months of practice, you drive while carrying on conversations. What changed? The activity became natural. Manifestation follows the same pattern. At first, assuming wealth may seem unusual. Assuming perfect relationships may seem unrealistic. Assuming complete health may feel unfamiliar. Continue returning to the assumption without worrying whether emotional excitement accompanies it. Naturalness will quietly replace effort. One day you will notice something remarkable. You no longer react to thoughts of your desire with longing. Instead, you think of it as though it already belongs to you. That is the shift, not emotional intensity, natural possession. There is a profound peace that accompanies genuine acceptance. It feels almost ordinary. Many mistake this ordinary feeling for failure. They say, I don't feel anything anymore. Exactly. You no longer feel desperate. You no longer feel separated. You no longer feel like someone reaching. You have entered the state of having. There is no need to constantly celebrate what you already possess. Observe someone wearing their favorite watch. They were excited the day they received it. Weeks later, they barely notice it upon their wrist. Has the watch disappeared? No. It has become part of normal life. Your fulfilled desire should become equally normal within consciousness. If every visualization still fills you with intense longing, perhaps you are still viewing the desire as something outside yourself. Bring it closer. Let it become ordinary. Let it become expected. Let it become obvious. The greatest transformations often occur in the quietest minds. There is no strain, no forcing, no emotional exhaustion, only peaceful acceptance. People frequently ask how long they should persist. Persist until your new identity feels more familiar than the old one, not until you feel emotional, not until the outer world changes. Persist until thinking from your fulfilled desire becomes your default way of seeing life. When the old story appears, simply decline to identify with it. Do not wrestle with it. Do not fear it. Simply return, again and again. Each return strengthens familiarity. Each return weakens the old identity. Eventually, what once seemed impossible begins to feel inevitable. That inevitability is the birthplace of manifestation. Some believe they must eliminate every negative thought before success can arrive. If that were true, no human being would ever transform. The mind naturally produces countless passing thoughts. You are not judged by every passing thought. You are shaped by the state you continually return to. Think of a river. Leaves may float upon its surface, yet the current continues in one direction. Let stray thoughts be like those leaves. Do not climb into the river to chase them. Allow the current of your chosen identity to carry you forward. When circumstances contradict your assumption, remember that appearances reflect yesterday's acceptance. Do not surrender today's assumption, because yesterday's reflection still remains. A seed planted beneath the soil gives no immediate evidence of life, yet invisible growth has already begun. Would you dig up the seed every morning to check its progress? Of course not. You trust the unseen process. Treat your assumption with the same confidence. Leave it undisturbed. Do not constantly inspect your emotional condition. Do not continually question whether you have done enough. The questioning itself delays the rest that accompanies true acceptance. Instead, ask yourself one simple question. If this were already true, how naturally would I think? Then quietly think from that place, not dramatically, not forcefully, naturally. Perhaps your desire is financial freedom. Instead of emotionally begging for abundance, begin viewing yourself as one who is already secure. Perhaps your desire is love. Instead of desperately chasing affection, begin seeing yourself as someone who is already cherished. Perhaps your desire is success. Instead of hoping recognition will someday arrive, quietly accept that your contribution already has value. This quiet acceptance gradually reshapes perception. Perception reshapes behavior. Behavior influences experience. Experience confirms assumption. Thus the circle completes itself. Do not become discouraged if nothing appears to happen immediately. Invisible change always precedes visible expression. The roots appear before the tree. The blueprint exists before the building. The idea forms before the invention. Likewise, consciousness changes before circumstances reveal the change. Trust this invisible sequence. Your task is wonderfully simple. Accept, remain faithful, return whenever necessary. That is all. You are not required to manufacture emotional excitement every morning. You are not required to maintain perfect positivity every hour. You are not required to suppress every human emotion. You are only invited to remain loyal to the identity you have chosen. Eventually, the world has no choice but to echo your acceptance. The mirror never argues with the face before it. It simply reflects. Life behaves in precisely the same manner. When you change what you consistently accept as true about yourself, the reflection must eventually correspond. Therefore, stop measuring your progress by emotion. Measure it by naturalness. Are you thinking more often from fulfillment than from lack? Are you becoming less reactive to appearances? Are you finding it easier to return to your chosen identity? If so, you are moving beautifully. Even if the outer world has not yet caught up, remember that the oak tree spends a long season growing where no eye can see it. Its greatest work begins underground. The same is true of every genuine transformation. The unseen always precedes the seen. The invisible shapes the visible. The inner determines the outer. So today, release yourself from the burden of emotional performance. You do not need to force happiness. You do not need to create excitement. You do not need to pretend enthusiasm you do not honestly feel. Simply accept. Quietly, calmly, persistently, let your new identity become as ordinary as your own name. Let it become so familiar that you stop wondering whether it is working. People who possess something do not continually ask if they possess it. They simply live. Live inwardly from the end. Walk mentally as the person you desire to be. Rest there, return there whenever your attention wanders. Do this without strain. Do this without fear. Do this without chasing emotion. For the deepest creative feeling is not excitement. It is the peaceful certainty of being. And once being is accepted, becoming is no longer necessary, because what you have accepted within yourself is already complete. The visible world simply follows, step by step, revealing what consciousness embraced long before the eyes could see it. When that understanding becomes your foundation, you will discover that the greatest manifestations are born not from emotional intensity, but from quiet conviction, unwavering acceptance, and the effortless recognition that what you seek has never truly been separate from who you are. There comes a moment when you realize that the mind has been trained to believe effort is always the price of achievement. From childhood, you were taught that if something is valuable, it must be difficult to obtain. You carried that belief into every area of life, including your inner world. So when you began to apply these principles, you naturally assumed there must be an emotional struggle involved. You believed that if you were not feeling something powerful, then surely nothing was happening. But look closely at your own life. The most influential beliefs you possess were not built through emotional intensity. They were accepted through repetition and familiarity. You did not become convinced of gravity because you celebrated it every morning. You did not accept your own language because you experienced overwhelming excitement each time you spoke. These assumptions became part of your nature because they were repeatedly experienced until they appeared self-evident. Your chosen identity follows the same law. The purpose of imagination is not to entertain you for a few moments before you return to doubt. Its purpose is to acquaint you with a version of yourself that eventually feels more real than the old one. Every time you enter your desired state, even for a few quiet moments, you are becoming familiar with a new reality. Familiarity slowly dissolves resistance. It softens the feeling of impossibility until the extraordinary begins to seem entirely reasonable. Many people become discouraged because they imagine their desire one evening and wake the next morning with the same worries they had before. They conclude that nothing changed because their emotions return to what they have always known. Yet habits of emotion often lag behind changes in consciousness. Just because an old emotional pattern visits you does not mean you have returned to your former identity. Think of someone moving into a new house after living in the same place for 20 years. For weeks, they may instinctively drive toward their old neighborhood before realizing they now live somewhere else. Their temporary mistake does not mean they failed to move. It simply means an old habit is completing its course. The same happens inwardly. You may temporarily think from your old state. You may react in familiar ways. You may even catch yourself speaking the old story. Instead of condemning yourself, simply remember where you live now in consciousness. Return to your new dwelling without criticism. Every return makes the new home feel more natural. People often create unnecessary pressure by believing every thought carries equal creative authority. They become frightened by passing doubts. They attempt to police every moment of the day, afraid that one negative idea will undo weeks of faithful assumption. Such fear places attention upon the very thing they wish to avoid. Creation does not resemble a fragile glass ornament that shatters at the slightest touch. It resembles a great river that continues flowing, despite small disturbances upon its surface. A single leaf does not redirect the current. A passing breeze does not reverse its destination. Your dominant state is the current. Individual thoughts are merely leaves. Allow them to pass. Do not assign meaning to every mental movement. There is remarkable freedom in realizing that you are not required to become emotionally perfect before life begins to reflect your assumptions. If perfection were the requirement, no one would ever experience transformation. Every person has moments of uncertainty. Every person experiences disappointment, frustration, or fatigue. These experiences belong to the human condition, but they do not define the creative state unless you identify with them. Suppose an actor leaves the stage after performing a tragic scene. Tears may still remain upon the face, yet inwardly they know who they truly are. The emotion belonged to the role, not to their identity. Likewise, circumstances may invite emotions that seem contrary to your desire. Experience them without surrendering your chosen identity. Let the emotion move through you while your deeper assumption remains untouched. There is wisdom in becoming less fascinated by appearances. The outer world has a remarkable ability to command attention. It presents facts with convincing certainty. It insists that what is visible must be accepted as final. Yet every visible condition was once invisible. Every building existed as an idea before it stood upon the earth. Every invention began as an unseen possibility before it became an object of daily use. Why should your own transformation be different? The unseen precedes the seen because consciousness always comes before expression. If you become hypnotized by present circumstances, you simply continue accepting yesterday's assumptions. But when you quietly remain loyal to your inward conviction, even while appearances disagree, you introduce a new cause into consciousness. That cause must eventually produce its corresponding effect. This requires patience, but not the patience of waiting. It is the patience of certainty. There is a vast difference between the two. Waiting says, I hope it arrives. Certainty says, it already belongs to me, so I have no reason to be anxious. Notice how peaceful certainty feels. There is no desperation. There is no bargaining. There is no frantic search for signs. The need for constant signs usually reveals that a person still believes the outer world determines reality. They keep searching for evidence because they have not yet accepted the unseen as sufficient. Yet every meaningful achievement in life begins before evidence appears. The architect trusts the blueprint before the building exists. The composer hears the melody before the audience applauds. The author believes in the story before the first reader turns a page. Why should you demand visible proof before trusting your own assumption? Trust is not blind belief against reason. It is loyalty to the reality you have consciously chosen. Every evening offers another opportunity to strengthen that loyalty. As the body grows quiet and the world begins to fade, imagination becomes especially receptive. Do not use those precious moments to replay disappointment. Do not rehearse conversations that reinforce limitation. Instead, gently occupy the fulfilled state until it feels effortless. Do not force vivid pictures if they refuse to appear. Do not strain to create perfect scenes. Some people imagine clearly. Others simply know. Some hear words. others experience quiet conviction, the form matters far less than the acceptance it produces. Perhaps all you experience is a simple inner recognition that everything is already resolved. That quiet recognition may accomplish more than hours of emotional excitement. There is also no need to compare your journey with anyone else's. Comparison is another form of distraction. One person may experience rapid changes. Another may witness gradual unfolding. The timing belongs to the bridge that connects your present assumption with its visible expression. You are not responsible for constructing every step of that bridge. You are responsible only for remaining faithful to the destination. Imagine boarding a train. Once you have chosen the correct destination and taken your seat, you do not run alongside the train attempting to push it forward. You remain where you belong, trusting the movement already in progress. In the same way, once you have accepted your fulfilled identity, resist the temptation to interfere with endless questioning. Let the unseen movement carry you toward its natural conclusion. Sometimes the greatest progress is taking place during periods that appear completely ordinary. Nothing dramatic seems to happen. Days pass with familiar routines. The mind becomes tempted to believe that everything has remained unchanged. Yet beneath the surface, countless rearrangements may already be unfolding. New ideas are forming, unexpected opportunities are approaching, old barriers are weakening, conversations are occurring beyond your awareness. Circumstances are quietly reorganizing themselves to correspond with your accepted state. Because you cannot see these invisible movements, the mind often assumes they do not exist. But invisibility has never been evidence of absence. The roots of a tree perform their greatest work beneath the soil where no eye can observe them. The seed never argues with the darkness surrounding it. It simply continues expressing the life already placed within it. You too possess that unseen creative capacity. Trust it enough to stop digging up your assumptions in search of proof. As you continue in this understanding, you will begin to notice subtle changes that are far more significant than dramatic emotional experiences. You may find yourself reacting differently to situations that once disturbed you. Circumstances that previously convinced you of failure no longer possess the same authority. You observe them, but you no longer bow before them. This is not because the world has changed first. It is because the one observing the world has changed. When the observer changes, the meaning of every experience changes. Two people can witness the same event and arrive at entirely different conclusions because each interprets life through the state they occupy. One sees limitation where another sees opportunity. One expects rejection while another naturally anticipates acceptance. The event itself is not the determining factor. The consciousness behind the interpretation gives the event its significance. This is why changing your assumption is infinitely more powerful than trying to manipulate circumstances. Most people spend their lives attempting to rearrange effects while leaving the cause untouched. They fight appearances, argue with conditions, complain about outcomes, and wonder why nothing fundamentally changes. Yet the visible world can only continue expressing the state from which it springs. Change the state and the expression must eventually follow. Consider how effortless many transformations appear in hindsight. When people look back after a profound change in their lives, they often struggle to identify the exact moment everything shifted. They cannot point to one emotional breakthrough or one perfect day. Instead, they realize there was a gradual inward movement. The new identity became so familiar that one day they simply noticed life reflecting it. The process was quiet, so quiet that they almost overlooked it. There is something deeply comforting about this realization because it removes the pressure to manufacture extraordinary experiences. You no longer wake each morning asking, "How can I feel enough today?" Instead, you ask, "Who am I choosing to be today?" That single question redirects attention from emotion to identity. Identity always comes first. Behavior follows identity. Experience follows behavior. Evidence follows experience. Trying to reverse that order only creates frustration. If you insist upon seeing evidence before accepting a new identity, you remain dependent upon yesterday's reflection. But when you accept the identity first, you create the possibility for tomorrow's reflection to differ from today. The outer world is always arriving slightly behind the inner one. Once this becomes clear, impatience begins to dissolve. Imagine standing before a mirror. If you smile, the reflection smiles. Yet there is always the smallest interval between your movement and the image that follows. You never become alarmed by that brief delay because you understand the order of cause and effect. Apply the same understanding to your own assumptions. Become the cause. Allow life to become the reflection. Do not reverse the relationship by demanding that the reflection move first. There is another misunderstanding that often troubles sincere seekers. They believe that because they do not constantly think about their desire, they have somehow abandoned it. In reality, when something truly belongs to you, it rarely occupies your thoughts every waking moment. Think about your own home. Unless someone asks you about it, you probably spend very little time thinking, I have a home. You simply live there. Its existence is so natural that it requires no continual mental attention. The same will eventually become true of every fulfilled desire. When the desired state becomes natural, you think from it rather than about it. There is an enormous difference between those two positions. Thinking about wealth often means wealth is still viewed as distant. Thinking from wealth means security has become part of your perspective. Thinking about love usually implies longing. Thinking from love expresses confidence, appreciation, and ease. Thinking about success often carries hope. Thinking from success carries expectation. You are not trying to keep your desire constantly before your mind. You are allowing it to become the quiet background from which your thoughts naturally arise. This explains why forcing endless affirmations is not always necessary. Words have value only insofar as they awaken acceptance. If repeating a statement helps you settle into your chosen identity, continue joyfully. But if repetition becomes mechanical, anxious, or exhausting, pause for a moment and remember its purpose. The words are not the power. The acceptance they produce is the power. One sincere recognition of your true identity can accomplish more than 1,000 hurried repetitions spoken from fear. There are moments when silence carries greater creative force than speech. A quiet acknowledgement that says, "This is already true of me," may establish a deeper conviction than hours of mental effort. Notice how naturally children accept ideas. They do not demand endless evidence before believing what they have embraced. Their imagination flows without constant resistance because they have not yet trained themselves to worship appearances. In many ways, the journey is not about becoming someone new, but recovering that simple willingness to accept the unseen without endless argument. The analytical mind has its rightful place in daily living, yet it often becomes an obstacle when it attempts to govern imagination. It asks for proof before permission. It insists upon visible evidence before inward acceptance. Left unchecked, it will question every movement and challenge every assumption. Do not fight the analytical mind, thank it for its concern. Then gently return to your chosen state. Every return weakens the habit of doubt without creating conflict. Conflict only strengthens what you resist. Acceptance quietly redirects attention. This is why gentleness possesses remarkable strength. Force implies opposition, gentleness implies certainty. A person who knows who they are has no need to argue with every contrary appearance. They simply remain faithful to themselves. Faithfulness is not measured by emotional excitement, it is measured by consistency. Can you quietly return to your fulfilled identity after the day's disappointments? Can you remember who you are when circumstances tempt you to forget? Can you retire each evening with the inward recognition that your chosen reality remains intact regardless of today's appearances? These simple acts repeated faithfully possess extraordinary power. People often imagine transformation as a single dramatic event. Yet nature itself reveals another pattern. Dawn does not arrive all at once. The night gradually yields to light until one moment you realize morning has come. You cannot always identify the exact second darkness ended, but you unquestionably recognize the new day. So it is with consciousness. The old identity slowly loses its influence. The new identity quietly gains strength. Eventually, you discover that what once required deliberate effort has become your spontaneous way of seeing yourself and the world. That is when persistence has fulfilled its purpose. Not because you forced yourself to believe, but because belief became effortless through familiarity. There is no greater freedom than reaching the point where your desired state feels ordinary. At first, you may think ordinary sounds unimpressive, yet ordinary is precisely what you seek. Extraordinary things still feel separate from you. Ordinary things belong to your everyday experience. Make your desired identity so ordinary that you stop admiring it from a distance, stop placing it upon a pedestal. Stop treating it as something reserved for another version of yourself. Bring it home into your present awareness. Allow it to become as familiar as your own reflection. When that happens, your conversations begin to change naturally. Your decisions begin to change naturally. Your expectations begin to change naturally. Even your posture, your expressions, and your responses often shift without conscious effort because behavior always aligns with accepted identity. Others may notice these changes before you do. They may comment that something seems different about you. Perhaps they cannot explain it. Perhaps neither can you. Yet the change is unmistakable because consciousness is always expressing itself through countless subtle channels long before dramatic results become visible. And even if no one notices immediately, remain unmoved. You are not seeking validation from observers. You are establishing agreement within yourself. Once that agreement becomes stable, the outer world inevitably begins echoing it in forms you could not have predicted. Opportunities emerge through ordinary conversations. Answers appear where confusion once existed. Encounters that seem accidental reveal themselves to be perfectly timed. What once looked like coincidence begins to resemble the natural unfolding of an assumption that has finally become so deeply rooted that it no longer depends upon mood, emotion, or outward reassurance. From that point onward, you cease asking whether the process is working because the very question belongs to the old state, and you have gradually outgrown the habit of living from questions instead of quiet certainty.